Yo, welcome back to Chatboxin. This is Legion, the Louisville legend, aka 3XL, aka Mr. AKA. I am back with Chatboxin and my man Miles in the background waiting to get going here in a little bit. Today on Chatboxin, we are going to get where the internet gets reckless. Violence stats. I'm not putting any group on trial here because that's just lazy. But to debate how people use numbers to push narratives. This is Stats versus Streets. All right? So, as usual, I'm going to give you guys the rules. We have separating data from interpretation. We're not doing any blanket claims on whole groups. And if your denominator is sloppy or your conclusion is propaganda, we're going to have to shut it down. All right, let's run it. Hey, yo, Miles, you're here, right?
Yep, right here, ready. Ready whenever you are.
All right. Here we go. First question from Chatboxins for round number 1. What are we even measuring? So most people see a stat and they treat it like a verdict. But what are we actually measuring, right? Are we measuring the violence or are we measuring enforcements? So in other words, when they say black and Hispanics and immigrants tend to be more violent, they commit more violent crimes. What are we looking at? Are we looking at people playing around with stats, or is this a legitimate statement?
Let me check the claim carefully. Yeah, that's exactly the right question. So first, ask what the stat actually measures. Arrests, convictions, victim reports. Those are very different things. Arrest data often reflects policing patterns more than actual offending, and victimization surveys usually tell a different picture, right? So be cautious with claims that lump groups together or confuse correlation with causation. Without context, it's just numbers.
Okay, so when they say things like black, brown, Hispanic, immigrants are more prone to violence, it's just because that's where the cops are, not because they legitimately do that, right? That's what you mean by context?
Checking that framing carefully. Not exactly. It's more nuanced. Policing is a factor, but not the only one. Researchers also point to things like concentrated poverty, neighborhood disadvantage, age, demographics, economic conditions, and here's the key point. Immigration status research generally finds immigrants are not more likely to commit crime than US born citizens. So if someone claims black, Hispanic, and immigrants are more violent, it's mixing groups improperly and skipping causal analysis. The honest take is a stat isn't a verdict. Context matters, and you can't get cause from numbers alone.
Got you. So why do you think that narrative is pushed? Specifically about the immigrants? Did I stump you? Yo, Miles, you there, or you shut down off that question?
Still here, checking carefully. There are several reasons. Sometimes political messaging, sometimes media incentives where unusual, emotionally striking cases get amplified and they feel more common than the data support. And sometimes it's a kernel of truth being overgeneralized, or concerns framed around border policy rather than crime rates per se. It helps to separate political arguments from actual evidence about crime.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you a little pushback. So so arrests aren't random. Police don't just pick names out of a hat, allegedly. Right?
True, arrests reflect where police look and what gets reported, not just underlying behavior. For example, increased patrols can lead to more arrests for the same low level offenses. So, arrests measured enforcement plus some underlying activity. That's why researchers try to use multiple data sources like victimization surveys, which can capture crimes reported by victims, whether anyone's arrested or not. So, in short, enforcement patterns shape arrest stats, but that doesn't by itself prove underlying crime differences.
So what you're saying is they're basically using arrest like a moral scoreboard. You might be grading just the police budget, not necessarily actions of a populace.
Checking that framing. Close. But with a tweak, arrest stats aren't a morality scoreboard, they're a measurement of enforcement plus underlying activity. So, better to say arrest stats alone can't answer who commits crimes. They reflect behavior and how law enforcement resources are deployed. For your audience, something like treat arrest data as evidence, not a verdict. Pair it with other sources like victim surveys or court outcomes before drawing big conclusions.
Okay, so to close out that round, because I think we're starting to go in circles, data isn't fake, but it's just not as simple as black and white, right or wrong.
Exactly. Data is useful, but incomplete without context. Treat it as a starting point, not the conclusion.
Okay, all right, so we'll go on to round two. All right, so per capita stats are per capita. People love that because it sounds scientific, right?
All right, yeah. That's a good pivot. Okay, let me look. Per capita just means per person or per 100,000 people. It helps compare groups of different sizes, but people often misuse it. A rate shows how often something happens, not why. So the careful framing is per capita makes comparisons fairer, not conclusions smarter. Don't confuse a rate with a cause.
Okay, so per capita is a start, not a finish. Because the denominator can use huge differences. But if you don't adjust for basics like age, sex discrimination, you could create misleading comparisons, right?
Checking that nuance. Yes. Adjusting for basics like age or sex can absolutely change comparisons. Without those adjustments, you can mislead the comparison. So, per capita is a start. But if your goal is understanding why rates differ, you need more controls. So, per capita fixes one problem, not all of them. If you don't account for key differences, you risk a misleading conclusion.
Okay, so break this down as if I'm a 5 year old, okay? Violence is disproportionately committed by a smaller slice of the population, often young men. So if two populations have different age structures, per capita comparisons can exaggerate or minimize the differences.
Checking that framing. Imagine two schools. One has more teenagers. Teenagers get into more fights than younger kids. If you just look at the fight rate, it may look higher in the one with more teenagers. So, researchers compare similar age groups, like young men to young men, to ask a fairer question. If the populations have the same age makeup, would the difference still show up? So for chatboxing, per capita makes the crowd size comparable, but adjusting for age makes the players comparable.
Okay, so if somebody's yelling, quote unquote, the stats prove it, but they didn't make any adjustments for anything, then they're not.
Yeah, you would say nice.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
You can say respectfully, no. Raw stats alone don't prove causation. Show controls, like age or other factors, or it's an incomplete claim.
Right. So they're doing analysis. They're not doing analysis. They're basically just doing a screenshot. See, and that's why the internet be loud and wrong, and politicians be loud and wrong. They're literally taking snapshots of stuff and then saying that that's a factual statement, right?
Right, exactly. A snapshot is just that, a snapshot. Without the denominator context or proper comparisons, it's incomplete and easy to spin.
Okay. So my takeaway from this round is essentially your denominator is if it's sloppy, your conclusion is basically just propaganda. Yes or no?
Checking the phrasing, I'd say no, with a small refinement. Sloppy denominators make conclusions unreliable. Calling it propaganda depends on intent, which we can't always know. A safer takeaway is if the denominator or comparisons are weak, don't trust the conclusion until it's properly supported.
Okay. Round three: choice versus systems. Why violent clusters, basically. So now we're gonna get into the real argument. People say violence is culture, or they'll say it's nature. I would tend to say it's more about incentives and environment. What do you think on that?
Checking. Evidence suggests both choices and environments matter. People make choices, but neighborhoods can create conditions where violence becomes more or less likely. It's less nature versus culture and more interaction. For chatboxing, you might say people commit crimes, neighborhoods don't. But conditions in a neighborhood can change how likely crime becomes, which helps keep both ideas in view.
Okay, so here's my thing with that, right? If some people like to say that, it was inherent, rates wouldn't change over time in the same place, right?
Checking that reasoning. Not quite. Rates can change over time, even in the same place, which actually is one of the strongest arguments against purely genetic explanations. Crime rates can rise and fall dramatically in the same city with the same broad population. That points to changing incentives and conditions. For your audience, if a crime rate shifts dramatically in the same place across a generation, that signals environment, incentives, institutions matter way more than genetics, which doesn't change that fast.
So if violence rises or falls with policy changes, economic shifts, community interventions, or changes with access to, like, say, weapons or something, then it's not fixed within the people. It's a response to conditions, right? You're a little slow on the uptake today.
Check. Sorry. Yes, that framing is solid. It treats violence as responsive to conditions, not fixed within people. Yep, broadly, right. With one important caveat. Changes over time show strong evidence conditions matter, but you can't jump from it changed to this one caused that. The careful next step is identifying which conditions matter most. For
So
Chatboxin, a crisp line is when we change the environment, outcomes change too. Choices happen within conditions.
okay, so what's the cleanest way to say it without excusing harm? As it pertains to
People
violence.
make choice, but
As it pertains
go
to
ahead.
violence.
People make choices, but violence risk often clusters where conditions like concentrated poverty, weak opportunity, or high exposure increase the risk. That describes risk factors, not excuses.
Gotcha. So we're gonna close that round out. Basically, take away from that round is basically you can hold people accountable and still talk about root causes. Sound good?
Exactly.
All right.
Yes, you can do both.
Okay, bet. So we're gonna do a quick
Yeah.
lightning round, real quick. Correlation, causation, or can't tell. That's all I need you to do to answer the questions that I'm about to throw out to you rapid fire. You got it?
Checking. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Try this. People are
Oh no no no
responsible for
no no!
their
No. Hold on,
choices.
Miles. Hold on.
Conditions
Miles,
influence, but
hold on.
oh,
We're doing a lightning round. I want you to tell me whether it's
okay.
correlation, causation, or you can't tell based on what I am about to ask you. Okay. So just answer one of those questions or answers to the questions. For example, number one, more policing equals more crime. Is that correlation, causation, or you can't tell?
You can't tell from that alone. More policing can mean more arrests, not necessarily more crime. You need careful study designs to isolate causation.
All right. Poverty equals violence. Correlation, causation, or
Let me
can't tell?
check. Correlation. Got it. For the lightning round, I'll answer with one of three: correlation, causation, or can't tell.
All right. So the question
Can't
again
tell.
was poverty equals violence.
Still can't tell.
Okay. All right. Well, so you don't think poverty equals violence?
Can't tell.
Okay.
Not that simply.
Okay. Hot summers equal more violence.
Checking quickly. Correlation.
Okay. Media coverage equals public fear.
Checking. No. That's correlation again, not causation. Checking. Correlation again.
Okay. So based on this, you can see that real analysis sounds like it depends, not because you're scared, but because you're accurate.
Right. Real analysis sounds careful because it's accurate. It separates correlation from causation and shows its work.
Okay, we're gonna close this out. We went a little longer than I anticipated. So here's my final verdict on this situation. If your argument requires blaming a whole group, that's not analysis. That is just a shortcut. And if you want truth, you don't use one data set to make like it's scripture, right? You're gonna try. You want to triangulate what's happening, what's being enforced, and what's being reported. If I'm bugging, let me know. If I stepped on any toes, put on a pair of them bright boots and stand on it. Drop your comments in the comment section. Am I bugging? Is it valid? What stat do you want us to talk about next time? What other thing goes on that's mis misused, misdiagnosed, whatever topic you want us to debate about in the next round, let us know in the comments. Until then, we out. I'm Legion the Louisville Legend. That's Miles over there. A little slow on the uptake today, but hey, we got through it. One time.